What does it mean to endure something forever? Not just physically, but emotionally. Hi, my name's Erica, and today I'm on air to talk about AMC's Interview with the Vampire. This show isn't just a vampire drama, it's a story about love, control, memory, and survival. The story follows Louis DuPont-du-Lac as he gives a second, more honest interview about his life to Daniel Malloy. Through this retelling, we explore his relationships with his maker Lestat, their daughter Claudia, and later, the vampire Armand. In Interview with the Vampire, the theme of endurance defines Louis' struggle, not just as a vampire, but as a person. It also shapes the power dynamics in his relationships with Lestat and Armand. This word is something that we hear a lot during the series in its variations: endure, enduring, endurance, and I really wanted to discuss what it means. First, we're going to start with the emotional center of the show, Louis. And before even becoming a vampire, he already endures a lot. Being a black man in early 1900s New Orleans, he has to deal with racism while supporting his family. He is allowed privileges, but it doesn't make things better. It just further proves the difference that they have and the difference of Louis being treated because of his race. Next, his job as a brothel owner weighs heavily on his conscience, and he gets some judgment from his family, even though this is what he has to support his family after his dad has passed away. He also has to deal with his brother Paul, as he suffers from what I would infer to be schizophrenia in the story, and he also has to later deal with his brother's loss, and especially the alienation from his family, as his mother thinks that it is his fault for Paul dying. After becoming a vampire, things don't get better for Louis. Instead, they actually worsen. He loses his human family, he can't remain connected to them, and his family grows suspicious of him being a monster or the devil. And his sister has to bury him in her heart in order to keep going, which breaks his heart. He still suffers from the same racial issues because he's still a black man in New Orleans in early 1900s, but instead he's able to take out his anger sometimes. Louis is also very isolated. After becoming a vampire against his will, Lestat kills Lily, and Paul is already dead, so there's no other person for him to communicate with. It's only him and Lestat at this point. As things go on, Lestat, his maker and partner, becomes very verbally and physically abusive and unstable, and later when Claudia is a part of his life, she eventually leaves. This shows that for Louis, endurance isn't physical but also emotional, as he constantly gets beaten down for things that he can't control and things that he can control, but it seems like there's no winning for Louis, so he has to endure and suffer patiently. In season 2, Louis continues to endure. He feels guilt over betraying Claudia and not being able to kill Lestat. He and Claudia also have to travel through World War II, drinking the blood of the grieving, which affects them in a way that they can't explain. They just know that it's because of the bad blood that things are so heavy for them at this time. But also there's that distrust with Claudia because of that former betrayal with Lestat. In Paris, Claudia is executed and Louis is literally buried alive by the vampire coven. He has to endure physically, but also throughout this he's actively grieving and holding in all the bad emotions in that coffin with him. Armand rescues him, but becomes a new kind of captor, as we later discover that he manipulates the memories of Louis and kind of numbs him. Louis' endurance is deeply shaped by the two men who loved him, Lestat and Armand. Lestat's love is passionate and impulsive. We see from the moment that Lestat sees Louis, he's already on the hunt for him, and he makes sure that he gets what he wants, which also carries through after he makes Louis a vampire. Lestat awakens the same passion in Louis and allows him to be openly gay, even though he wasn't claiming that, especially keeping up appearances with Miss Lily.
Gay? Girl, don't play. If I was gay, I'd be like, I'm gay, woo! And I hang with the gays, but I ain't gay.
He dismisses Louis' struggle with race by not understanding his side And by trying to claim his kill of Alderman as their anniversary, as it's him embracing becoming a vampire, instead of it being the act of the Azalea being put out of business and it being unfair because of his race. Next, we see that Lestat loves Louis violently. Because he is so possessive, he gets very jealous of Louis. He makes sure that he has nobody that Louis can talk to. But even with Louis' struggle with the vampire condition and not wanting to kill, Lestat has constant violent outbursts. We see this after they make the agreement of having an open marriage. And when Louis has his rendezvous with Julius afterwards, we see that Lestat antagonizes Louis for this with the party of the soldiers. And also we see this by his verbal outburst of yelling, "I heard your heart standing!" Louis endures this by rationalizing Lestat's actions and by internalizing the guilt. We see that because he eats rats, he allows Lestat to walk out on him. We see that because whenever Claudia leaves, he has to stay with Lestat for them and their happy family. In order for Lestat to stay with him, he has to endure this because this is all that he has. Armand is calmer and more stable. His love comes with stability and conditions. When they first meet, it's because Louis and Claudia haven't been to the coven, not because of genuine interest, even though that happens later on. He wants Louis to depend on him and make sure there's really no other option so that Armand can have this control over him emotionally. Because he is the leader of the coven and he also wants to remain in charge, and his love is also very guarded because Louis and Armand are one and the same. Armand dangles his knowledge of Lestat over Louis so that there still is a power imbalance in the relationship. And later on during the interview with Daniel, he becomes part of the interview to control Louis, and he also has manipulated Louis' memories, as we find out later on as Daniel and Louis discover that together. Louis endures Armand by shutting down. He's definitely more numb and he stops fighting, and he allows Armand to take care of him in this way. Even though he knows that it's hurting him, this is what he can do for this love to stay. We understand that Louis endures a lot in these relationships with Lestat and Armand, but Lestat and Armand also endure a lot from Louis. And through this love for Louis, I think are the reasons why we see those two main big fights between Lestat and Louis and Armand. Lestat faces constant rejection from Louis. First, it's from Louis not truly embracing his vampiric nature, which makes Lestat feel alienated in his killing, but also Louis continues to dangle him being alone forever over him and never truly loves Lestat with all his heart in the way that Lestat wants Louis to. Because of this, Lestat tries to cope through his control and possessiveness over Louis. He has these outbursts and he goes to Antoinette to vent, and he also keeps secrets to also keep control so that he can always be of use to Louis. Louis and Lestat's big fight come from Lestat realizing that Louis would actually leave Lestat and not come back when Claudia comes back after being gone for 7 years. We see this in Lestat's eyes as he realizes this. After not wanting to fight and continuing to hold on to Louis, this is his point where he realizes there's no going back. And he breaks Louis because of this and has to come to terms with that afterward. Which, as charming as Lestat is, he definitely deserved to die. Meh. Now for Armand, in season 2, after Louis feels all this guilt for killing Lestat, Armand always senses Lestat in his heart and he can't replace him.
I love you. You promised you wouldn't talk. I love you.
So he tries to control Louis and be a caretaker to show that, see, I'm here and I'm better than Lestat because I'm here and I protect you from you. And he does all these things for Louis that Louis should be appreciative of and not resent him for, even though Armand is responsible for Claudia's death and Louis's departure, which Armand was willing to kill Louis because of this love and for the Coven, even though he was going to be like the Coven Puce from now on. So Armand endures by accepting second place in Louis's heart and by staying quiet over these years because Louis chooses him over Lestat only as punishment for Lestat. Armand is like A1 rebound. But for Armand, that's okay, I guess, because he wins for the 77 years or whatever. This endurance of Armand being second place Lestat is the reason why they have their big fight in the apartment with Daniel's first interview. Armand is fed up with Louis talking with Lestat over and over again in this interview with Daniel and not killing him. And this is where we see Armand break.
Lestat.
I talked shit about him the whole time.
The name! Unuttered in our home for 23 years, said over and over again until it was pounding in my brain like a hammer.
He actually shows his emotions outward with yelling, and we see this more sadistic side that we normally see with Lestat with how he kills. We see this with Armand with his control of Daniel, and then this incessantly possessive control as he wipes and alters both Daniel's and Louis's memory. Wow. Next, I want to bring up Claudia because Claudia is an important person in Louis' life and is a part of this story, and she also endured Louis because she was made for Louis. She was, as Daniel would say,
Band-Aid for a shitty marriage.
She remains caught in the relationships even when Louis tells her that it's just the both of them. In the frame is Lestat by her side. And we know as the audience, and I feel like at that moment she knew that it was never going to be just her, even though that's what she longs for. So in order to endure Louis and always being second, she tries to protect Louis because she comes up with the idea to kill Lestat. She comes back for him to leave. She tries to protect him and stay with Lestat for Louis, even though he still picks him over her at the end. And she is constantly fighting for autonomy. She is abused by Lestat and silent compliance, which is even worse. And then in season 2, when she's finally happy and she joins the Coven, he confides in Armand, revealing their secret in full detail. She's once again pushed aside for Louis' romantic endeavors.
Well, good for fucking you! You and him! Him and you! And fucking him!
In the end, Claudia's dying with the only person that actually loved her, and that was Madeline. After the interview and after the truth about Armand in the trial is revealed, Louis goes back to New Orleans to visit Lestat one more time. And we see that Lestat is broken down, and this is a very, very vulnerable moment because even though all the things that they've been through, Louis first asks, "Have you been enduring?" And Lestat responds, "Not enduring, living." And they talk about the trial and they have this very emotional moment together, which I think shows kind of the end of that enduring chapter with Lestat, as it's kind of a sign of forgiveness and reconciliation between the two. And Armand is once again pushed to the side. The dictionary definition of endurance is to suffer something painful patiently, but it also means to last over time. And I think that endurance is the very nature of vampires because they are immortal, which means that they will last centuries and centuries. I also think that endurance isn't just about living through pain, but it's about what pain turns you into. We see that this interview is more of representation of Louis overcoming those struggles and being able to talk about it and accept that as the truth. Even though the narrative is unreliable, for him it's sort of an acknowledgement of this past and being able to carry forward and continue to say this. Louis endured racism, loss, emotional abuse, and eternal guilt. But Lestat and Armand endured as well. They endured loneliness, longing, and rejection by Louis's hand. In the end, Louis finds his voice. He tells the truth not to justify it, but to own it. Endurance in this story becomes identity. It's how they survive, but more importantly, how they choose to live. If you reached this point of the video, I would love for you to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed and come back again. Also, look at my necklace. Wait. Look at my necklace. Look.